All right. What's kind of interesting is once you've been selling on Amazon, you find that most people, if you've not yet discovered this, you probably will have this, for lack of a better phrase, a love-hate relationship with Amazon. They love the opportunity that it creates, but they start to find little things they don't like about the whole thing. So how do you manage that? How do you work with that? Because at the end of the day, I think it truly is a great opportunity that Amazon has created. So let's make sure we focus on the positives here. But there are occasionally things come up that, maybe get under sellers' skin. And what do you do when some of those are beyond just mere annoyances, when maybe they're kind of bigger issues? So to talk about that, I have CJ Rosenbaum here, who's an attorney who specializes in Amazon seller related stuff. So did I phrase that right? Amazon related stuff? Is that a legal term?
Yeah, we've grown as Amazon sellers have grown, like, plans of action and dealing with, BSIP, intellectual property complaints, is our bread and butter. That's also grown that when Amazon keeps your money and keeps your inventory, we get it back by arbitration. A brand sues you or you need to, assert yourself. We'll represent you in court when necessary. We developed a whole team regarding just traditional business legal services, for Amazon sellers. Also, I'm not shy about saying this, but as Amazon sellers have developed their own brand, private label brands, we now protect you and we stop other unauthorized sellers. So as you folks have grown and matured, so have we.
Yes. So let's get into your background here in just a second. But for context, you were just a speaker at the Ecommerce Business Builder Summit that I hosted right there at the end of July in 2021 as we're recording this. It's now August. So it was pretty recent that it came out. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this game, because you've been doing it for a while, I understand.
Yeah. With my team, not me, but my team of geniuses. We're the number one in the world. We're the best, the fastest, the largest in the world. So I was a trial lawyer, right? I was an ambulance chaser, medical malpractice, employment discrimination. I was the guy in court, getting juries to give my clients as much money as I could get for them. And big firms with boatloads of advertising sort of came into the marketplace and really decimated the mom and pops. And so that kind of coincided with my divorce. And so I had to kind of find something else to do. And I did some divorce work, which I didn't love. And then one of my entrepreneurial clients that I helped write the contract to buy a business, because I always did that, no matter what I was doing, I always worked with entrepreneurs. His Amazon-based business that I helped him buy got suspended. So he calls me up and he's like, listen, I know you're in like a career shifting right now. That business you helped me close, I got $400,000 in it and it's frozen. And you don't know what that means, but there's no one competent helping people like me. Look into it. And I guess this was around 7 years ago or so, 8 years ago. And I looked into it and I was like, this is cool. I mean, you got David versus Goliath. You need to know how to issue, identify, and write persuasively. And then you got intellectual property, which nobody else was doing. I mean, you have these other people who are not lawyers who claim to be able to help. And I was like, I can do this better. So I studied for about a year and a half, hired a website guy who had some experience on Amazon, built a website, and launched at an event called SCOE in Philadelphia. The organizer's name was Rhonda Schneider.
Okay.
Awesome person. And we launched and never looked back. And now we are number one by far. We employ about 35 people around the world. And I couldn't be happier, man. I love this stuff. I love it. So that's how I got into it.
Got it. So you kind of stumbled on this, it sounds like. And now you're dealing with Amazon sellers. And so you probably hear, the gripes and complaints and whatnot. So again, let's focus on the positives. So what are the positives? Because I think we should do the positive sandwich. So we'll start with the positive and we'll get into the meat of what's not so positive. And then we'll end with positive, just so it all stays on a positive note. But what are the positive reasons people work with Amazon and why it's still a valid business model? And is it still a good time to get into it for those who maybe are still new into this?
It is a great time to get in. It's a great time to be, and people are there because that's where the money is. It's like, when Dillinger, why did you rob banks? He's like, that's where the money is. This is where retail is. If you want to buy and then sell products, Amazon is the name of the game, and there's no end in sight to their growth. Last night, I'm lying in bed with my awesome wife, who's actually head of our human resource department, and boom, an advertisement about buying automotive products on Amazon and pharmacy products on Amazon. And it's
like on TV?
On mainstream television. Tremendous. So yeah, get in and stay in, because that's where the consumers are. And it's not perfect. There are a lot of warts, but if you want to make money in modern retail, especially if you are working from home or don't want to open up a brick and mortar store, this is the place to be. No doubt about it.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, before we hit record, we were talking about, kind of aging ourselves, and you and I both grew up in the pre-internet era. So like, if you wanted to have a retail store, you would go to the mall, and I don't even think Simon was around, but like, Simon, the big mall provider, you go to whoever it was that ran the mall, you get a store, and just hope they have the right foot traffic, to come to your store. And, maybe you advertise on the radio or something like that. So your options were much different. And, hopefully you got a good Yellow Page location.
People kind of forget, like, listen, you're always dealing with problems in business and how to surpass and get past the obstacles. But back then in the mall, you were looking at a 6-figure investment before you had a single sale.
Exactly.
You're opening up a store on your main street. You were looking at $50,000 minimum before you start getting a sale.
And probably what, a 10, 20-year lease?
Yeah. So now, I mean, literally it's what? A cell phone and a credit card, and you are in business and growing and using the growth to fund your growth. So listen, every business has its stresses. Selling on Amazon is no different.
Yes.
But it's still a tremendous opportunity because there's really no upfront costs.
Yes. And that's such a good point. Your upfront costs, or whatever you're selling, which you could dabble in retail arbitrage, kind of like I did when I first got started. You could start small. I know some people say, oh, you really need like 50,000. Like if you're going to go after, hero products and supplements, yeah, you probably need $50,000 to $100,000 to start off with. But I don't think every product needs that. That's a whole separate thing. So I think there's lots of opportunity in some of the niches people don't even look at.
And the arbitrage, it's risky because Amazon doesn't love it, right?
Okay.
But retail arbitrage is great. I was just in Marshall's the other day, taking my teenage pain in the neck daughter shopping, and I love backpacks. So I grabbed a solo backpack. I look it up. I'm getting it for like $29 at Marshall's. It's selling for $53 on Amazon.
Okay.
And I know that right from the store.
Yep.
So great way of learning the platform. Great opportunity. No upfront costs.
Yeah, exactly. Not like with a store, you're not having to pay a franchise fee. Like sometimes YouTube puts me down these weird rabbit holes of, watching content over and over. Somehow I got into like where like they keep showing me all this stuff about some like franchise channel. And so like the guys like talking about like all these kind of like big name franchises, which I won't say the names of them, but Eat Fresh, and think about like so especially restaurants, like they're not as good of a deal as what they sound like, because again, you're limited by geographical terms. You're probably paying just as much you're paying Amazon 15% only for what you sell. In these other cases, you might be putting $50,000 down on a franchise fee plus 12 to 15% of your sales, and all these, little fees they charge on top of it as well. And you have to go with their system. There's Amazon that gives you a lot of freedom. So there's pros and cons of that. So you were kind of alluding to sometimes things don't go right with Amazon. So where are you seeing where things sometimes don't go right, and how do you manage that? So now getting into the less than love relationship.
All right, the less than love. Okay. I have personally interviewed dozens of Amazon staff who read plans of action and deal with these issues, cross-examined, I don't know how many of Amazon's executives. Okay. and they have drank the Kool-Aid. It is all about the consumer experience and guaranteeing the consumer experience. Okay. So what do? You got to make sure you have good products. If you're doing retail arbitrage and you go into Marshall's, don't buy something that looks like it's been through the ringer. Make sure you got great products that the consumer is going to perceive as brand new. Make sure you maintain your documentation, because Amazon wants to see documents. So maintain it in advance. Watch the forums, attend courses like this. And you really want to get a nice broad knowledge. But if you keep your eye focused on what the consumer is going to perceive, you are so far ahead of the game. You're doing great.
Yeah, exactly. So, Amazon's very consumer focused, and we got to remember that's actually a good thing, because if the consumer doesn't trust Amazon, doesn't want to come on the platform, you can have whatever best keywords, whatever the latest hack is, whatever honeymoon strategy, whatever, it's not going to work if there's not people there. So Amazon built it. They didn't just come. They worked very hard for a long time to get people to come and stay coming. And to your point earlier, they're putting money into national mainstream advertising campaigns to keep people coming. So again, focus on the positives. Now, let's talk about when, Amazon's maybe protecting the customer, but maybe it's not in the seller's favor, and the seller maybe didn't even necessarily do anything wrong. Can you give some examples, and what might we do to protect ourselves in those type of situations?
Sure. Like Amazon sellers always will bear the brunt of returns. Customer got it. Customer sent it back to Amazon. Amazon's warehouse staff doesn't have the ability to figure out what should go back into inventory and what shouldn't. Another customer gets it and they say it's used. You have no control over it, right? But on the positive aspect, the rate of those cases coming in is significantly less than the traditional retail loss factor, which was shoplifting and your own staff's
True.
It's so much less.
And so, Amazon will reimburse you for most of that.
That's right.
If you know where to
look. A brick and mortar store, 20% of your inventory was just going to disappear.
Yeah.
So on a positive level, you have to deal with these issues, but you're not losing 20%, nowhere near. So you just got to deal with it and continuously focus on how to be a better seller. And then when Amazon wants that plan of action, we write the best in the world, but it doesn't mean you can't do it yourself. Focus on the consumer and how you become better. And
well, let's dive down that rabbit hole with the plan of action. So one of the things you had mentioned in your session for the summit recently was that sometimes even just putting in cases might be helpful, to rather than just say, hey, this happened, fix it, to put in a plan of action, even though you're not actually responsible for anything that happened, but you're kind of taking responsibility, which they seem to like. So can you explain what the plan of action is, why it's important, and how you would phrase it?
Okay, so plan of action is when Amazon really says, hey, you have an inauthentic, a used sold as new, you're tracking, your late ship, whatever it is. They're looking for you to explain, identify the root cause of the problem, what you did to make it right immediately. We call it the immediate corrective action. And then the long-term of the systemic changes to your business, or the improvements, so that whoever is reading this in behalf of Amazon could be confident that it's not going to have another problem with you.
Right.
So Amazon staff in India, the people that I spoke to, the dozens of people I spoke to, they look for that same format in all the communications, right? Root cause of the issue, immediate corrective action, long-term changes to your business, or long-term improvements. So since they're trained to read it that way, write it that way. Write it that way. Don't blame Amazon. Don't blame the consumer. Short, concise, persuasive. Give them what they need to click the box that says, yep, seller reinstated. Yep, ASIN reinstated, and to move on.
Okay, but what about when this is, I know what a lot of people are thinking, but what about when it's not my fault? I didn't do anything wrong. I'm supposed to take responsibility for something that isn't my fault. Like Amazon shut down a listing because they said it was an adult product, but it's not an adult product. So how do I phrase this?
I would do the same exact thing. I wouldn't fall on the sword and say we screwed up when you didn't, right? but there's almost always ways that you can redraft the listing to make it more clear that it's not an adult product. Look for things that other people could perceive as making an adult product when it's not, and find a way to improve. Everybody can improve. Every business can improve. You can always look at something and say, oh, you know what? Let me tweak this a little bit, because that could be potentially perceived as blah, blah, blah. Continuous improvement, responsibility, innovation. If you look at Amazon's 14 leadership principles, that stuff is beaten into their heads, into their culture, and you can use that stuff. And they're brilliant, man. Listen, Bezos is successful because he's brilliant.
He launched himself into space. I mean, we should give him props for that.
In a phallic rocket ship. So yes,
Yes.
Take responsibility, innovate, find better ways of doing it, and then express it in one page or less in your plan of action type document.
Well, that's good. And maybe, if anything, just at least attempting to put it into that format makes it a little bit less, I feel like I can't believe that. Like, you know, it's, if you're making it more factual, and even if you're, here's what we did was we reviewed the listing, or we updated a photo, or you just changed 6 words on a bullet point and just say that you updated the bullet point to make it clearer. At least you're showing you did something. So I can see that being helpful. And to your point, sometimes it's better just to work with the system you have. So if it's drilled in their heads of, this is the leadership principles, this is whatever, it's hard to get around that and say, well, this is how I want it done.
Well, let's use the example. Let's use the example you just said. You went through the listing and you changed 6 words. That required a quote unquote deep dive review of the issue.
Okay.
It required identifying the root cause of it, so that verbiage. It identifies that the consumer's experience is going to be better because it's going to be more clear what they should expect and perceive. And the reality is that is a thoughtful business maneuver to make that listing better.
Yeah. And that's such a good point what you just mentioned. And this took me a while when I used to work in the Fortune 500 world to get that, because we sometimes take for granted that it's this grandiose whatever, but sometimes like what they're looking for with these things is like 2 sentences. Like, and like, just to give an example. So like, I remember going through taking some classes and having my former employer pay for these classes. And one time it was rejected because they said it was too wordy. So I just eliminated a couple sentences and it got through. And sometimes that's literally what they want, is just, they need the if then. If it says this, then approve. If it doesn't say this, don't approve. And so the more you can find what that formula is, the better.
You know, we also do, as Amazon sellers, have grown and developed their own brands, right? I'm going to change my background here for a second, right? We also do brand protection for Amazon-based brands, right? And one of the things that we've learned through the arbitrations against Amazon, our investigations, speaking with executives, Amazon's lawyers often say stuff they wish they didn't, is that there's certain verbiage that they will trigger reactions. So if you make a complaint that says distribution agreement in it, it is thrown in the trash bin. You could say counterfeit and distribution, it goes in the trash bin because you used the word distribution, and Amazon does not enforce distribution agreements, right?
So you mean like your own distribution agreement?
Yeah, like let's say
okay, got it.
You know, you're selling the Sanderson key rings, right?
Okay.
And someone else starts selling Sanderson key rings, and you say they're counterfeit, they're toast, right? You say they're unauthorized and counterfeit, your complaint gets ignored because it used a word that they're trained to just ignore.
Yeah.
Right? So you want to make it concise, you want to make it accurate, you want to be persuasive. And when you're not sure what the issue is, so you did such a deep dive investigation, you identified 6 words that can be better, that persuades Amazon staff that you're doing what you can for Amazon's consumers, and that wins.
Got it. So the more you can phrase it in a way of how you're doing it for Amazon's consumers, because they're a consumer focused company. It's not about me and my business, but this is what we're doing for Amazon and Amazon's consumers. The more it's going to trigger those words so that, you're protecting the experience of the consumer. Would be
Yes.
the way to phrase it, as opposed to, yeah, but this person's on my listing.
Yes.
Yes.
Listen, why would any retailer, like let's say Amazon, care whether the consumer is getting a great product from you or a great product from somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's not the focus. There is get this consumer experience. So make it about the consumer experience.
Yeah, and I was just talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about how, like, in Amazon's world, like, on just about every listing, you can scroll down and find sell your version, or it's worded differently than that, but it's set up to be a marketplace. So, we got to phrase everything that it's for the consumer experience and how it affects the consumer, not protecting my bottom line, because they don't want to be your bottom line protector. They want to protect their consumers, which ultimately affects their bottom line. And so, as Zig Ziglar said, you can have anything you want in this life as long as you help enough people get theirs. So you want to help Amazon get what they want. So let's talk about when
Wait a second. That was a clear demonstration of our vintage about you mentioning Ziglar.
Zig Ziglar, yes. All right, so yeah, he might be before some people's time, but he's a classic. Him and Jim Rohn, and the pre Tony Robbins motivational speakers. I love Zig Ziglar. I love.
I'm a huge fan of Grant Cardone, and Cardone mentioned Ziglar.
Oh yeah. I mean, I would imagine he probably was, when he was moving up in the world, he was probably listening to a lot of Zig Ziglar. Yes. So yeah. All right. Cool.
Also for Amazon sellers, I would highly recommend that you find one of these gurus, one that connects with you, to stay motivated, to identify things you can do. A lot of things under your control, a lot of things may not be. You got to figure out other ways.
Right.
I love listening to Grant, man. That guy throws so much stuff against the wall to make things stick. I love it. I love his marketing.
There's a lot you can take from Grant, even if you don't like him. I know he rubs a lot of people the wrong way. I mean, I've been to a couple of his, in-person events over the years. So I have a certain level of respect for him, but I also see where, sometimes he can be a little over the top. But also keep in mind, some of that is just marketing. And so maybe that's not everyone's marketing style, but when you really listen to some of his core, like, business ideas and acumen, like, he's actually very good at what he does.
Yes.
And so just filter out maybe some of the flashy bling bling stuff. So, all right, well, back to Amazon. So let's talk about what happens when things maybe are a little bit more serious. And so it's going beyond seller support or the seller support next tier. And now we have to get like a CJ Rosenbaum involved. What would be the type of situations where someone needs an attorney, and how do they avoid that? And what do they do in some of those bigger cases?
All right, here's the classic example. You are accused of selling counterfeit products and they're genuine. Okay, happens all the time. One, because Amazon makes it a bit difficult to make accurate complaints. And number two, the people who are making the complaints have sort of a focus of just getting rid of you rather than addressing, their problem, not being able to control their distribution. So if you are falsely accused of selling counterfeit products, you want to get that complaint retracted. You want to use a lot of the leverage that you have. And number two, if you are losing a boatload of money, you may want to use the courts. And I never rush anybody into court. Okay. Litigation is expensive and slow and a pain in the neck. And so you should never be involved in it voluntarily, unless you're looking at least a 5 or 10x return on the investment. Okay. Or else no point in going forward. Also, you may get dragged in yourself under the same accusation. So those are the examples where you kind of do need to speak with a lawyer who knows litigation inside and out, and also Amazon. Okay, because if you get one guy who knows how to litigate, but he doesn't know how it relates to actual business on Amazon, you're going to get hosed. You're going to spend a lot of money and go no place fast. And if someone just knows Amazon, but not how to litigate. You're going to be kind of on a roller coaster going around and around and around, right? Without ever resolving the issue. So either you're falsely accused of counterfeit and you're losing too much money, or you got dragged into a lawsuit. And the goal is to resolve and get back into business.
What might be something that someone would be sued? So a lot of people here are private label owners, so hopefully they're not worrying too much about them being struck by counterfeit. It's not out of the realm of possibility. But what is something that would happen that Amazon might sue a seller?
Well, Amazon's usually not the initiator of lawsuits.
Oh, okay.
We've only seen a handful of those. Usually if Amazon's coming after you, like for an Amazon loan, or they believe you sold them counterfeit products, they will do it via arbitration, or they might sue you in the federal court in Seattle. But usually it's not Amazon initiating litigation. Litigation will be initiated by brands, usually in the Northern District of Illinois, which is the federal courthouse in Chicago. And we're involved in at any given point in time, I'd probably say 10 to 30 different cases just in that courthouse. I'm admitted to practice in that courthouse because the judges there freeze more Amazon sellers' accounts than all of the other courts in the entire country combined.
Okay. Now, is that just because Amazon has found the judges to be friendly there, so they maneuver that?
It's not Amazon, it's brands. It's like Prevagen and a whole bunch of other brands who file in Chicago because the judges give out these orders relatively easily. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where the judges issue an order. So therefore you bring your next case there, they issue the order freezing the accounts, and on and on and on it goes.
So always make sure you have your documentation as far as you have a reputable supplier and whatnot. And we're probably not talking about the person who dabbled in retail arbitrage and spent $100 at Nordstrom on, 3 units. We're probably talking about someone who has a pretty elaborate thing.
Yes. But also small guys get caught up in the net also.
True. I can see that happening. Yeah.
So you see a lot of that in terms of the courts in Chicago. And if you are a brand owner and you need to stop other people, you're also going to go to that courthouse because those judges are going to give you what you want.
Oh, okay. Got it. So if you're having issues, you want it to go to the Chicago courthouse, not the Seattle courthouse, because I could see Seattle might be a little friendly, little home cooking there for Amazon.
It certainly feels that way.
Yeah.
And even in these, we also take Amazon to arbitration if they refuse to release your money, they refuse to return your inventory, and it's in excess of like $30,000 or $40,000. Then an arbitration against Amazon will often resolve the issue. And if the arbitrators are drawn from Seattle, which happens, I'd probably say in maybe 10 or 20% of the cases, there's often a connection. Either the arbitrator's law firm has some relation with Amazon, or their spouse or children have some relationships. It's just a huge employer in that city. So we try and avoid that at all costs too. Yeah,
I could see that. And, to your point, even if they're doing their best to be as impartial as possible, I could still see sometimes there are these incentives that might be there because, they're more likely to have a kid who, is in the same baseball team as the son of a dad who works for Amazon or something. I mean, who knows? And not to say that people are doing anything shady. I'd like to think our, world at least is trying their best. Sometimes it's a little messy, but probably trying their best to be impartial. But humans are humans.
Like I tell you, I'll also throw it out there, and this is kind of surprising to a lot of people that let's say Amazon's just totally wrong, right? They owe you the $50,000. It's your inventory they're not sending back, and you just have banged your head against the wall so many times. When we file for arbitrations against Amazon to recover your money, to recover your inventory, you do get 2 sets of fresh eyes on the case. You get Amazon's outside counsel, who we have a great working relationship with, and you get the staff at Amazon who their lawyers work with. And when you're right, the vast majority of those cases settle because you have new people looking at it, right? At a kind of a higher level in the company. And I gotta tell you something, I have really very few complaints about Amazon's lawyers in terms of resolving cases that are crystal clear in our client's favor.
That's interesting because at the end of the day, like, they know, like, there's an expense to them for keeping up with these things. And, some of the bigger companies I've worked for, there was kind of this internal saying of like, we don't want to just give away, every frivolous lawsuit that comes our way. But at the end of the day, I think they also, maybe publicly state that for defense purposes, but probably deep down inside know that some things it's like, all right, just this isn't the hill to die on. We're in the wrong here.
The cases that are crystal clear where the seller is right generally resolve, and they don't really shake you down. Like, listen, I litigated against the biggest corporations in New York, the biggest corporations in America, Sears, KFC, Walmart, New York City Health and Hospitals, NYPD, I went against all these guys. And if they owed you $100, they would try and settle for 50 until you pointed a bazooka at their head, right? Amazon doesn't necessarily do that. Like, if you show that, no, you owe $100,000 and the case is going to settle, it's going to be really close to that $100,000 mark or dollar for dollar.
Oh, wow.
So when we go to arbitrations against Amazon, the cases where we are really 100% right tend to resolve fairly. The cases where our clients want to fight, but they get caught doing bad stuff, those cases tend not to resolve, and we have to go to a hearing. Okay. And then there's the ones that are sort of close calls, and those kind of rightfully go to a hearing. Where you really do need someone to really hash it out, and sort of be a judge and jury. But I got to tell you, if Amazon has stolen or maintained or refused to return your inventory or money, and you've got the goods on them, arbitration is a good way to go. It's fast, it's relatively inexpensive, and generally they do settle.
Got it. All right. So to close this out, what kind of closing advice that maybe you haven't mentioned before would you recommend to folks do to prevent themselves from getting into some of these situations?
Do research. Document what you do, and then document the sourcing of your products. Even if it's your own private label, keep records, and even like an ongoing diary, whatever system you're using, maintain everything every step of the way. So at any point in time, if you need to show somebody else, Amazon, whoever it is, what you did, that you are right, you can do that rather than playing catch up later. Document what you're doing. So that's my number one advice. Stay on top of it, document what you're doing, save your documents in a way that, boom, you have a problem, you can email them, review it, and get them out the door and turn them over as quickly as possible.
Gotcha. Yeah, you don't want to be scrambling for documentation, and definitely don't come up with fake documentation.
If you do, you better be real good at it, because they got a lot of smart people who know Photoshop.
Yes.
Metadata, Photoshop.
Oh yeah. All right. So if anyone wanted to reach out to you because they had questions or they just want to follow you more, where would you like people to go?
Okay. If you are a traditional third-party seller, AmazonSellersLawyer.com is our website. We have a tremendous amount of free content on our website, at our blog, on our YouTube channel. We're now producing anywhere from 2 to 3 videos per day of content out there. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's under the name of the firm Rosenbaum, Familaro, and Siegel. And you'll just get, it's the world's greatest information from my team, because we work collaboratively together, and our editing team keeps it interesting every day. Within a minute to 2 minutes, you'll get more knowledge on a cumulative basis than any place else. And we now have more free information for Amazon sellers than any website on earth.
Oh, wow.
Okay? I'm inclined to say twice as much, but I'm not really sure that's accurate, but certainly more than anybody else.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Gotcha.
If
Well,
you're a private label seller and you're
mhm.
getting to that point where you're sort of saying, it's not just private label, I am a brand.
Mhm.
Okay. Check out brandprotectionamazon.com. It is meant for you to protect your brand, protect your sales, and protect your consumers. And we have a whole team of people that do nothing but make sure you differentiate yourself so that you can stop other sellers, monitor and stop them amicably as much as possible.
Awesome. Well, love it. So this was definitely helpful. It's interesting to hear some of the behind the scenes things, which hopefully gives people a little bit of solace of like, oh, well, that's not happening to me. Or if something did happen, that there are ways to resolve things, and Amazon's not really out to get them like sometimes people feel like. So sometimes those feelings are just our feelings, as some say, facts don't always care about your feelings. So it's one of those things, just to realize that keep your nose clean and you can have a good relationship with Amazon long term is what I've found. Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Hey, thank you for having me. And yeah, I'm available. Call, email, check out our website, blah, blah, blah. I'm here for sellers.
Awesome. Thanks so much.